Greetings from around the world. My name is Tom, and welcome to The Fetish Traveller. This podcast is all about us sitting down with key figureheads of fetish communities around Europe and the rest of the world. We're going to be learning more about their history, what's going on at this current point in time, and what the future could hold. So, sit back with a drink of your choice and enjoy the podcast. We are incredibly proud to have Leathermen Travel support us on this podcast journey. You're planning a future leathery trip? Don't worry, Leathermen Travel have got your back. Visit their website to learn more about leather and fetish events, clubs, and weekends happening around the globe. Now, in this episode, I've got a real treat for you all. I've got the pleasure of sitting down with John O'Brien. Now, for those of you who travel to the various events around the world, there's a pretty high chance you would have already heard of this name. John currently lives in Dublin and is well known for helping out looking after the Leather Men of Ireland, supporting numerous charitable initiatives, and always bringing the good vibes into any room that he walks into. Be prepared to learn more about the Dublin Fetish scene, how the city itself has embraced the fetish scene, and the story of Leather Men of Ireland and how the club started all the way during the pandemic. Sit back and enjoy! So I am very, very pleased to welcome, albeit he doesn't really need a welcome nor an introduction to yours truly, John O'Brien. How are you doing, love?
I'm good, thank you. I'm still recovering from Dublin Leather weekend. Another week's sleep, I'll be fine, but I'm good.
You know, I was talking to Chris, my partner, about kind of the week or two after Dublin Leather Weekend, and it really hit us hard in terms of kind of getting back on our feet because it was just such a fabulous weekend. Obviously, not trooping your horn there, but at the same time, you've got so many people there, new people, people who you've met. Everything just comes into place there, and the amount of talking that we did, John, I feel like I need some reimbursement from that.
Well, well, imagine talking in between drinking, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But it was really, really good, John.
Thank you.
John is obviously well known for working with the Leathermen of Ireland. Currently, you can see him out and about at Sally Bowles in Folsom, Easter. John, dear, why don't you give us a bit of a little introduction about yourself, if that's okay?
Yes, of course. I'm John O'Brien. I live in Dublin, Ireland. Lived here all my life so far. I don't know how this has happened, but in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be 61. I've been involved in the fetish scene probably since the late 90s. I was a bit of a latecomer in that I was primary carer for both my parents. So that kind of kept me off the scene as such. And God bless the internet. And you young people won't know what it is to have dial up.
I do know the sound.
You do know the sound.
Just remember that.
Particularly for me, I'm into boots, as you might know. I'm into rubber boots and leather boots and that. And when you're watching a screen load, you see whether the guy's in boots or not, and it's going, and like you wait 10 minutes, and then oh, he's not. Okay, on to the next one. You know, so that was torture. You guys don't know what the meaning of torture is until you've been on dial up. And yeah, I very much involved with the scene now. I'm retired. I had an arterial aneurysm in 2011, which I was lucky to survive. So that meant my career working for what you would call inland revenue, I think, ended, which pleased a lot of people. But it's given me a lot of time to do different things. And apart from being involved in the fetish scene, I do some volunteer work at the hospice. I do a bit of training for the hospice, do a lot of fundraising for different causes. And I keep myself out of trouble. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or try to anyway.
And I think we do our best not to talk behind people's back, but everybody asks me the question, how does John get about the amount of traveling that you do in terms of just knowing people, going out and about, going across the pond is just not only inspiring, but just absolutely baffling, mate.
Well, it's one of the things I promised myself because it's like I'll do it while I can, because I know the time's going to come when I won't be able to do it. So I do what I can when I can. I think that's Eleanor Roosevelt says, do what you can while you can with what you have, or something like that. So yeah, that's my one of my mantras. I have a lot of them, but that's one of my mantras. Yeah.
Love it, love it. I'll have some air miles then, darling, is all I can say after this.
Yeah.
No.
Ryanair don't do air miles.
Oh, and almost casting back to the first time we caught up, and I was looking through your notes that you sent over prior to us recording this, John, and it's very similar to a couple of other people. I think the ECMC AGM that took place in Manchester 2 years ago was
I think, which was brilliant. I love Manchester Leather Weekend. A plug there for them. It's amazing, and you got to go. I think we might have met on one of the Zoom calls. you might have been in the background with Chris or that in one of the Zoom
Mm.
calls because we had so many of them through the time, and then I think we finally met in person when you were doing the counting of the votes and all that. You were so good. I was like, God, it's great to see somebody of your age so involved in the organization. Because usually it's the old guys like myself who are tottering around.
Yeah, well, it's the best way to get to know people, wasn't it? Me and
Yeah,
Chris from Italy just doing our stuff. So
yeah,
look at that with good memory. So John, let's take it back to you for where it all started. You kind of talked about that you started the scene. You've lived in Dublin all of your life, really. So what one must assume that you know your ins and outs and kind of all things, kind of the history of how the leather and fetish scene started. Now, obviously, a lot of people recognize Leathermen of Ireland in particular, and many key influences there. But what was that looking like? Let's say 20, 30 plus
years
years
ago.
ago. What do you
Yeah.
know?
Well, in the very early days, as I say, I wasn't too involved. So I'm going to go through a couple of the clubs that I've heard of, and,
Mm,
and and many of that I was involved in. I mean, I know there was one in the early days called Gag, which I believe I've heard Panty talking about. Panty is our famous drag queen,
yeah.
and I believe Panty or Rory was involved back then. I don't know where it was, and I'm sure people will be able to message onto this and let you know where it was and
Mm,
where it was held. I first became involved with Michael Byrne, who you know, in Lube, which was leather uniform
yeah.
bear encounter. And I
Hmm.
remember going to my first event with that, with my boots in my bag, and they stayed in my bag. So I was so nervous. It's one of those weird things.
Did you go?
Um,
Did you go by yourself to your
no,
first
I went with
event?
two friends actually. I went with two
Mm,
friends. Two of them that I still know to this day, and one of them actually both of them were at Dublin the other weekend.
uh,
Um, yeah, it was just one of those things. It was in Slattery's bar, and it was upstairs, and I mean, it was probably very leather light now that I remember it.
mm.
I do remember somebody being there in an Aaron jumper, which maybe is a new fetish we could start. But yeah, so the lube would have been. I got very involved in that very quickly, and I used to do the cloakroom. I'm quite well known for doing cloakrooms at
Yeah.
various different events. I think it's a great way of meeting people. And for any newbies in the scene, I'd really recommend it because you get to talk to everybody, you get to see what everybody's wearing, and you
Hmm.
get to know everybody, and everybody gets to know you. And it's doing a bit of, and this is I have no alcohol, but it's my first time to say community. It's a bit doing a bit for the community as well.
I don't have any
Um,
alcohol as well,
yeah,
everybody.
exactly. Yes. So just kind of that is the way to go with it. Lube was quite good. It went on for quite a while. I think, no, I don't think I know. They joined the ECMC at one stage,
All right.
and but then the next year it kind of all fell apart. So
Mm.
and it's like everything else. I don't know if it's common on the scene, but it was back then. People were always complaining that there was nothing on, but when you held an event, they didn't turn up. So we used to have to pay for the venues, and at times you'd have maybe 25 people there, and you'd be paying over £100 as it was at the time for the venue, and you just couldn't afford it. You were paying it out of your own pocket because there weren't enough people. So that kind of died a death. And then we had, and again, the order of these is kind of mixed up. We had dress code, which I think we
Hmm.
ran in Panty Bar for a while when it was called Gubu, which is going back. Then we had XXL, which we got a solicitor's letter from the place in London saying that we couldn't use it. Then we had,
I was just going to ask that when
yeah,
you really go into that political nitty
yeah,
gritty of it with
I
XXL.
know. And
Wow.
then and then we had Rule, which was rubber uniform leather something, probably Encounter as well.
Yeah.
I used to work at that at the cloakroom for a while, and then we had to the Sunday Daily Mail did an expose on us about deviant times calling for no desperate times calling for deviant measures.
Oh,
That this guy
have
had
any of you got the article?
no, no,
Oh,
no. I no, I wouldn't use the I said newspaper to wipe my mouth. Anyway, so we had to like the owner said, "Would you mind leaving?" Because of that, it was an expose, and it mentioned his partner, who is quite well known in our society, a female partner. So, we kind of had to move from that. And
mm,
then after my stroke, I got involved in. I was secretary of Geared Ireland for a while,
yep.
and then I'm now secretary of Leathermen of Ireland. So it's kind of I think at this stage we probably have the most. fetish clubs that we've ever had in Dublin. We've got
Yeah.
Geared are still on the go. We've got Leathermen of Ireland. We've got Rubbermen of Ireland. We've got Oink, which is out in Kink, who are having
Mm,
probably they're having an event this Saturday actually, which I'm heading along to.
hmm.
And they have it in DV8, which is probably one of the most fetish friendly bars we've ever had. In Dublin, I think it's a great venue, and like Oink is very good. They've had maybe two, it must be, I think it's 4 or 5 events they've had. They call it Pig Pen, which
Yeah.
the name explains itself. And it's quite good, and the music isn't too loud for me, so yeah,
Yeah.
we're probably at the, at this stage, it's probably almost, what month am I free that I can go to an event? There's
Mm,
almost an embarrassment of riches now, which is great. And with so many people coming into fetish now, the interest is there, and I think you can see from our Saturday night at Dublin Leather Weekend. I think we'd over 280 people. It was
yeah.
incredible,
Yeah.
So excuse me. So yeah, I think the time for fetish is now, and probably, and which is great because with all the apps and everything, you think it's dying, but it's still there, it's still going, So yeah,
Yeah, I think that realization of the whole app thing was definitely a kind of just before COVID thing, that
mm-hmm.
kind of maybe 2015 to 2019, 2020. And then with the help of these new groups such as Oink, Leathermen of Ireland, and that coordination, from what I hear, is something that's still quite important in Dublin and Ireland and in general.
Yeah,
You've got, I guess that's what we experience in London as well, John, that good mix of your social spaces, your social meets crews, and then maybe the big party nights if people are into that bigger
yes,
kind of circuit level.
yeah.
Really, would you say that's
And
something that
I
like
would.
Dublin
I,
has?
I would, and it's great to see the real time events because that's kind of one of the reasons how Leathermen of Ireland started was literally around just after the start of the pandemic. And we were kind of saying maybe we won't launch, we'll hold off because Cahill is our president. He lives up in
Mm,
Belfast, and he was saying maybe we'll hold off until we can have a real event. We said, well, why don't we try online? Maybe people
wow.
would be interested. And I mean, it was incredible the number of people we got on the first call, and we'd had a lot of people from Ireland, from the UK, even had some people on from America, and we started off by doing our famous music bingo, which we're doing
Yeah.
again at Darklands, and we'd have a quiz, and we do a lot of collaborations, Celtic collaborations with the Leathermen of Scotland, which is brilliant. I love it. And
Mm,
we did one quite recently, and I've been talking to Gary about maybe doing one in another couple of weeks because people are still interested in doing them because not everybody like can get out, and if
hmm.
they want to have just I think I'm trying to remember, we did one on the 29th of December actually because it was between Christmas and New Year, so anybody wanted to save money we could still get together. And
Yep.
I mean sometimes they go on till 4 a.m. in the morning, and we solve all the world's problems and then we can't remember how we solved them. And then another thing that saved us was we got very much involved in fundraising.
Mm,
Eamon, he was one of our contestants this year. He works for the switchboard. He worked for the switchboard,
hmm.
and they were finding it very, very difficult to fundraise. So we literally I think we had 3 fundraising quizzes, and one of them, Panty herself, did quiz mistress for us, and was
Hmm.
brilliant. And I think we raised over €7,000 to keep them going, which was really good. And it's a nice thing to do. I'm going to say the word again for the community. And I do a secondhand gear sale for them every year as well. Now we did one for Switchboard and I did one for the homeless recently, which is really
Mm,
good because it's great for people who want to get rid of their gear because a lot of my gear shrank during COVID. And a lot of people have gear that they want to pass on, and it's great for new people to start as well. So I'd recommend it to any group that are involved with it. And get a few bits of gear together, sell them, make a few bob for people selling them, keep some money for the charity. It's a great fundraiser.
yeah, and I think I was speaking to somebody else who's recently done a podcast from us over in Spain, and he kind of mentioned that it's fantastic organizing leather and fetish kind of socials and events, but there needs to be that added connection to other members of the, let's say, scene or C word for community, really. And they,
Yes.
for example, do things for the elderly, people who can tell such tales in a case of giving back because they're living in homes. Really, it's something that I noticed, and Chris, my partner, when he was introducing me to you guys in the scene, saying, "Oh, they do so much work, whether it be during COVID or still now, in terms of charitable and giving back
Yes. And actually
initiatives."
I think you're talking about Rafa in Spain,
Hmm.
and what really, I think it's the association, the December 27th or something it's called, and it's something really
Yeah,
close to my heart as I get older. They're founding a care home for LGBTQ people,
yeah.
because I believe the last stats I saw, 75% of people go back into the closet when they end up in a care home.
Mm,
And I don't know about the
mental.
UK, but in Ireland, there are no specific LGBT care homes. And that's something we need to look at. I think that's going to be the
Mm.
challenge for our generation. Sorry, my generation. You're far too young. So, yeah, and that's a huge thing they're doing in Spain. I'm very interested in that, So,
Yeah, so that whole case of reciprocation, and you said the G word for generations, really. Did you see when everything opened after COVID, this kind of new wave that I think Theon probably represents it perfectly. I knew Mr. Dublin Ireland in terms of this kind
mhm.
of new wave of
Or
leather
Mr.
and
Dublin
fetish
Leather,
folk.
yes.
Yeah.
I did, because I suppose it's one of those things, because people were on the call. It was really great meeting people afterwards. And I know
Mm.
this isn't going to be a video call, but basically we were going around with our fingers together like a TV going, "Oh, that's you." When we go up to people, we'd literally say, "Oh, that's," and people met that way. And because in the quizzes we would have had separate rooms, we would have got to chat to people that might otherwise never have met, and you try and mix up the teams as much as possible, so
Mm.
that when people actually met in reality, the ice was broken,
Yeah.
so that they could start talking. And it's amazing the way it's come. And it is great to see the young blood, because I remember at one of my sales, myself and Sean, my friend, we went away to do something, and when we came back, Fionn, who's now Mr. Dublin Leather, and Rolo, who was
Mm.
Mr. Rubber and was second in MIR, they were sitting at the desk, and we stopped for a moment and we said, "Oh my God, we're looking at our
Oh,
replacements."
replacements. Yeah.
And and while it was a little bit tinged with sadness, it was tinged with huge pride and hope, because that's what I mean. We can't go on forever, so it's
Yeah.
brilliant to see, the influx, and that whatever influence we've had on them, that we can guide them and be there to support them. And I think that is such a huge thing. So
Mhm.
it's meant a lot to me to see how much the young people have come up. And of course, another one of my maxims, just to bore all your listeners, is show me, don't tell me.
Yeah.
And that was seen so much from Dublin Leather Weekend. The people who came along to volunteer and did stuff and did the door and were looking out for us, and you know that was such a huge thing. And it's great to see that involvement. And long may it continue.
Oh, perfect to hear. And with all of the youngsters coming in, that kind of cross generation, you all go to several of the big events together. And I think one of the first times that I did get to know you and the folks seeing, the Leathermen of Ireland logo was always at Sally Bowles in
Yes.
Berlin. And I think probably most people listening to this podcast now would walk along Berlin, Fuggerstrasse, they'll pop through on the way to New Action, they'll see Sally Bowles, and they'll always see someone from the club there
Yes,
or the
I mean,
flag.
particularly on the Sunday of Folsom, we do the Fetish Embassy of Ireland on
Mm.
the Sunday night, and a lot of people going by to no action, as I call it. They will kind of pop in and go, "What's going on here?" And it's such a cliche, but they're always sure of a welcome. When the Irish are there, it doesn't matter who you are or what group you're affiliated with. We're always glad to see people, and we'll always have raise the glass and have a toast and have a bit of chat and a bit of crack, as we say, which is CRAIC, yes,
Uh-huh.
uh,
Uh-huh.
which means fun and laughter and that kind of. And it's nice to be known for that.
Hmm.
But it's one of those things. And then I'm always organising meals out as well, as you know. Yes.
Hmm. Much, absolutely. It's all, well, when you go to some of these bigger events, it almost feels like you are the co-coordinator. You are the coordinator with all these things, John.
Well, I try to slow down and not to do it, but in the end, people say to you, "Oh, you're not doing something," and I go, "Yeah," and I promise myself every year, when we've too many people or the service is too slow, I've always said, "I'm not doing this again." And of course, as soon as the event comes, I wonder how many people want to go to dinner. So yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I enjoy it. I like. I think I said it at Dublin Another Weekend last year. I feed off people's energy. I kind of have this like vampire thing where when people are having a good time, I can feed off
Mm.
it, and it, and
Mm.
it, and it lifts my spirits as well. So it's
Yeah.
probably a very selfish reason why I do the organizing.
No, I think it's pretty valid, mate. It goes back to why we love creating these events in the community, whether it be kind of a big party night or just the socials, which is kind of what Leathermen of Ireland are really, really known for, the best opportunity to get to know people and I guess welcome new people onto the scene rather than people go kind of headstrong, fearless into these real big weekenders, and you kind of ask some people who you met for the first time, oh, what was your first event or something like this? And I asked that to a couple of people at Darklands last year. They said, oh no, this is my first kind of event that I'm going to. And I thought, oh my
Yeah,
God, seriously, I couldn't have
yeah.
pulled the courage.
Yes, I don't know how brave that you have to be so brave to do that. I mean, it's such a huge event. It's a brilliant event, but for it to be your first event, I'm like, oh my God, I hope you have friends with you who can look after you afterwards,
Yeah,
because it is nice
absolutely.
to start slow and then build up, But
Yeah, 100%. So almost going back, you mentioned kind of the groups that are going around and coordinating around Dublin, John. Do you have any idea of kind of what's going on outside of Dublin? Because that's a question that a lot of
Mhm.
people wanted to, I guess, find out on the weekend in Dublin.
Yes, there is in Northern Ireland, there's a group now called Kink and I for Kink
Mm.
Northern Ireland, and they're getting bigger all the time.
Ah,
They've had a few events in Boo Boo, which is one of the local bars there, I believe. Haven't had a chance to make it up to their events. I've been
mm,
to a couple of bear events in Northern Ireland, all right,
mhm.
but I haven't had a chance to go to any of the Kink and I group. There's a lot of young people, a lot of puppies, so it's really taking off up there.
Wow.
Um, I believe there is a bar in Cork, but I haven't heard of very many fetish events in Cork.
Hmm.
Probably one of the things we look at doing is having events elsewhere. But again,
Hmm.
it's like everything else. You can't guarantee the attendance, and
Yeah.
that's the problem, and it's a bit like, and I don't mean to sound so negative, but it's a bit like when I said about the events years ago, people say there's never anything on. And when you held anything, they didn't turn up. I nearly
Mm.
have to have people to pay in advance before we had an event somewhere,
Yeah.
and I think that becomes difficult, So certainly would like to look at having events somewhere else because at the end of the day, it's Leathermen of Ireland, it's not Leathermen of Dublin.
Mm.
But one of the things is because Dublin is such a big city, it does attract the crowds, and that is the thing. I mean, we're all looking forward to Pride here. I'm thinking of renting my house out for Pride this year. Excuse me, Pride in Dublin is the last Saturday of June, and someone I've never heard of, Taylor Swift or something, is having a concert on the same night. So can you imagine how much hotels are going to cost in Dublin for Pride? Yeah. So
Yeah, those Airbnb prices and
yeah,
the
I know. Yeah. So
really.
I live in a very small. Actually, Chris has been here. He can tell you how small the cottage is, but I can fit 10 people in if they don't mind stacking on top of things. So
Oh,
I don't,
brilliant.
and I'm not going to charge. Sorry, in case that comes across, I'm going to be renting it out. I'm not.
Oh no, he's nodding his head whilst this is just audio. No, I'm joking. John, you mentioned the P word for puppies. Now,
Mm,
synonymously, puppies are linked to the Irish community. I
mm.
think that's a matter of fact. I think people are completely gagged and surprised by how many puppies originated from Ireland. Do you know why that how it how and why it started? You know?
Well, I remember my friend Collie, who was over from Philadelphia. He's from Northern Ireland, but he was over from Philadelphia for Double Leather Weekend, and he was the first puppy I ever met. And
Mm,
for a while it was like he was the only puppy, and we were like, what's this puppy thing? Um, I think it probably goes back to, and I'm not sure of the statistics now, but I remember years ago we had the youngest population in Europe for quite a long time, and I think we could be
um,
going back to that. And the puppies, to me, and again, I'm not I'm not a handler or a puppy, but my understanding and my belief is that it's the safest time for the way to enter the scene. You've got your mask, you've got your hood, whatever. You can be a different person almost with it, and I think that was it kind of became an entry level for younger people. That's what I feel. I should probably ask one of the puppies when I was interviewing them last year for the Puppy Ireland contest. I should have said, "Why are there so many puppies?" But I think it's a kind of it's a comforting space and it's a welcoming space. And both the rubber and the leather community here have been very, very welcoming to puppies, and I think they would appreciate that. And for last year, Leathermen of Ireland facilitated the first Mr. Puppy Ireland competition, and we did it again this year, and we work very well together, and there's a
mhm.
great symbiosis there. So long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think of pillars of that Irish community in the sense of obviously Astrid did a fantastic job, but not to
Yeah.
mention,
Mm,
Rolo, Kevin equally is a
mm,
huge advocate of them as well. And you guys, to your point, somehow seem to cross the line and kind of very much so very fluid in terms of when you all attend your events together.
Yes,
I
yes.
think
I mean, now more than ever, between Oink ourselves, the puppies, we cooperate and we tend to attend each other's events,
mm,
and we have a Kink collective chat
oh
where
yeah,
we can say we're thinking of having an event on. Oh, yours is on there. Okay, no, we'll move to that kind of way. So we'll try not to clash,
clash. Yeah.
and then that way we can all go to each other's events, and it's good. Yeah,
Yeah, because I think that's something that probably still in some parts of various fetish big cities, it's probably still frowned upon to mix, really. I
yeah,
think some people would argue that to some extent you still need kind of specific, maybe fetish exclusive events because that's the kind of atmosphere that you want to bring, really. You want to do, for example, bluff only nights.
yeah.
To a fair extent, totally do understand that, but there's a reason why some people might not want it to be too exclusive. So you almost seem to have you need to have a good mix between
You
the
do,
inclusive
but
and exclusive.
I think there's room for both. I think there's
Yeah.
room for both. I mean, we had a bluff dinner there a couple about maybe 2 years ago, but anybody could go. We weren't like really
Mm.
being, no disrespect to Bluff. I'm a Bluff member myself, but it's not quite comfortable to eat in Bluff gear if you're wearing your best langlets and I mean, so yeah.
Oh,
So we were kind of open to anybody, and we try to be as inclusive as possible. And I think you probably saw that at our launch night in Penny Lane. I mean, I think we had international wise, we had more international people there for the first hour or two than there were Irish people. So
yeah. I was doing.
including yourself.
Thank you, darling. That half Germanness does come in handy sometimes. Yeah, I was doing my best to keep in touch on the Facebook group chat that you guys have, and just seeing so many people from all around the world saying, "Oh, looking forward to coming here," and then you almost have to stalk them and thinking, "Oh gosh, where are you from? Because I'm definitely going to see you." It was pretty mind blowing, and I guess it shows that reciprocation of how much you guys have travelled and still
Yes.
do. You obviously
I
raise
mean,
the aware.
we had the lovely Juan Diego from Costa Rica, who was very worried about the weather here because the lowest temperature they get in Costa Rica is 16. So I was like, bring a heavy coat,
Yeah, the vitamin C tablets if you get ill. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's nice to be welcoming, and I find that it's one of the things we hear the most is that people felt so welcome, and and that to me is a huge thing because it's the Irish way, isn't it? I mean, we have
Mm.
Céad Míle Fáilte, which means 100,000 welcomes, and that's one of the things that we like to be known for.
And I think on the whole, walking around Dublin on that weekend, everything did feel very safe. Sometimes I feel in obviously specific parts of London where obviously you have 30 odd boroughs, everywhere's going to behave differently. The only area that I maybe felt a tiny bit hostile when you're walking around in Full Bluff would be that kind of Temple Bar area, which is
Mm.
naturally obviously very boozy. People can emotionally and physically change.
And full of tourists.
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah,
were saying
I
there.
I was
Sorry.
like one of the guys was saying they Bobby was telling me who was one of our contestants they went to one of the old style bars and they were dancing in it and like and I mean I was almost crying at one stage. They were saying that one woman came up and she videoed them
Mm.
because she wanted to send a video to her daughter who is in Australia who's a lesbian and she wanted to show her this is how far Ireland has come.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'm like, oh my God, and that was lovely. That was so nice to know that, like, we're having an effect. And it's all about, and again, sometimes when I hear the word, representation, it's like, oh, yeah. But I mean, it was being visible, and that visibility was helping somebody to see, oh, look how far we've come, And you will always get the idiots. I mean, we have a bet when we're walking anywhere. How long will it be before somebody sings YMCA?
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, please be original, so touch wood, 99.9% of the time, there's nothing. You just feel like people might be a bit curious, but you know, we're enjoying ourselves. We're not doing any harm
Mm.
to anybody. Let it on, So that tends to be
Mm.
the way it is in Dublin.
So, given how much of a positive fast track record Dublin and Leathermen of Ireland has had recently, what's next then? What could you see kind of prioritizing then for Leathermen of Ireland, or anything else that needs to change possibly for Dublin or wherever around Ireland?
Um, I never want to stay still or not change, but if it works, don't fix it. But we will
Mm,
be having, I mean, we've already started planning DLW 2025. We're looking at different, instead of a restaurant, we're looking at a hotel maybe this time.
mm,
Um, we're looking at different venues. I didn't think the lunch venue was great myself. So we're looking at changing that. But like we will keep very many elements of it. I know I was having second thoughts about the Irish dancing, but so many people enjoyed it, and
oh,
I've
I
got
was on
such
my
great
feet, John. Don't worry.
yeah, I've got
The
some great
the
feedback.
videos say it all.
Yeah, the videos say it all. So yeah, I had to go and get hangers for the other venue, so I missed a lot of it, unfortunately. But yeah, I think we'll keep doing what we're doing. We'll try and get to other events around the country. We'll do a bit more fundraising because you can never have enough fundraising.
Mm,
The Switchboard are doing okay, I think, but we'll probably do some more money for them. We might do. It's the 50th anniversary of the Switchboard this year, and I'm on that committee as well. So
yeah.
we're having a bit of a get together for that in September.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, we'll plan. We'll do our Irish Fetish Embassy or Fetish Embassy of Ireland stuff for Berlin. I have a couple of things I'm involved in Darklands as well. So
Mm,
we'll be doing that. So yeah, pretty much what we're doing, but trying to welcome more people and
yeah.
be open to people and be open to I've got some good positive feedback about Dublin Leather Weekend, and we'll be looking into that as well. So,
Good.
and then
So,
we'll continue to support the other groups as well as we have done.
yeah, absolutely. So, to your point, not making anything too groundbreaking, but just doing things as better as it
Yeah.
could possibly get.
Yes, and I mean, it was probably what I was going to use to finish the call, but and for myself personally, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Leathermen of Ireland here, but to be completely cliched, I would like to leave the fetish scene in a better state than which I found it, and I think I've made good foundation for that. So I'll keep going as long as the body lets me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said this to my friend Guy who helped me kind of with a Mr. B Wings magazine. He said, "Oh, what was your final comment?" And I said something like, we're all kind of small cogs in this big wheel, and we do need to make sure that we're not looking spick and span and clean all the time for photos. We do need to do work, really. It's not going to run by itself. So it exactly means very similar to what you said, John. So
Yeah,
totally.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Well, John, perfect timing, love. All I can say is a big thank you. I'm sure the listeners have
It's
learned a hell
it's
of a lot.
it's because I talk so fast. They'll probably need to slow it down.